So I first became fascinated by AI back in 2019. I was knee-deep in the thick of my PhD studying retail companies that had implemented AI. Now, some had done so successfully using AI to drive real business results, but others pretty much saw nothing. It was just another expensive piece of technology. And as I dug deeper, analyzing these companies' AI strategies, talking with dozens and dozens of executives and frontline workers, I started to see a pattern. Many of the organizations that had been successful, they didn't just deploy AI, they reframed it. Some went so far as to ban the term artificial intelligence entirely. To them, artificial felt threatening, right? By its very etymology, it implied something at odds with human intelligence, something to be resisted rather than embraced. And so they reframed it, they renamed it. And I've spent the last 7 years helping organizations understand AI transformations and researching them myself, most recently as part of the Work AI Institute at Glean. Now, our first report, our first body of research is what we call the AI Transformation 100. My colleague and co-author Bob Sutton and I wanted to understand, in a world of both massive AI hype and massive disappointment, what actually is working. And so we decided to collect insights. We collected insights from more than 100 different leaders, builders, researchers, technologists, to find out. And while it's really hard to pick favorites, I picked 5 of those insights to share with you today. Insight 1, make AI part of the work, not a side project. A common mistake we're seeing leaders make in organizations is believing that AI adoption is fundamentally an access problem, right? If we build it, they will come. If we invest in the technology, our employees will use it. As we've heard countless times today, in most organizations, we don't have an access problem. In many cases, we have an integration problem. Now, why is that the case? Well, a big reason is what's sometimes referred to as the toggle tax. We know in enterprise organizations, and in particular Fortune 500 companies, workers can toggle between apps and tabs up to 1,200 times per day. We also know that if they become distracted as they toggle, it can take them more than 23 minutes to return back to the original task. It starts to feel a lot less like work and a lot more like this digital pinball. And that's why smart AI leaders, they recognize the importance of embedding AI into the flow of work, into those core coordination rhythms, the sales plays, the marketing campaigns, the engineering sprint cycles, as we saw at Zendesk. They're not asking employees, at least initially, to step outside their core workflows to use AI, because every step outside adds to this toggle tax. And so I think a useful question to ask is, for your most important work, how many toggles does it take to use AI? Often this number is surprising, and often it's surprising to the people who aren't necessarily doing the work, but need to implement the technology. Now, when we think about embedding AI into the flow of work, part of it is workflow related, part of it is technology related, but there's a part that's deeply psychological. So when I ask you, AI is like a blank, how do you fill in that blank? I want some guesses. Assistant? Partner? One more. Savant? Intern? Therapist? So this reflects the makeup of the room today. So most people actually initially will fill in this blank with something like a tool. It's a calculator, it's a search engine, it's a tool, it's a computer. But there is a group where increasingly they're referring to the technology, their mental model, sometimes in the research is called their technological frame, is that of a teammate. And what's fascinating is AI users who report significant productivity with AI are significantly more likely to use this mental model of a teammate. Now, why is that the case? Well, what we see is when workers are using the mental model of a tool, they tend to think about it very transactionally, right? It's like that calculator. It's something you pick up, use, and put down. But when they use the model of a teammate, they're not just asking, what can the technology do for me in a really transactional sense? They're recognizing the technology is imperfect. They're not giving up after the first prompt. They're often using the same prompt in different technologies, and they're pushing the technology to think and act deeper. And so I think this is a really important part of embedding AI in the flow of work, not just the technology, not just the workflow, but also the psychological aspect. Insight 2, don't automate the soul of work. So once we've embedded AI in the flow of work, once we've moved beyond adoption, a challenge and a mistake leaders often make is believing that just because something can be automated, and perhaps can be automated effectively, means it should. In our report, we cite a study from Stanford that found that 41% of Y Combinator AI startups are automating tasks that workers would prefer to keep human. And what we know is this is especially dangerous when it comes to the deeply human parts of work. The judgment calls, the trust, the relationship building, the creativity. Parts of the process, parts of the workflow are meant to be inefficient. They're meant to be frictionful because it's that friction that often activates what psychologists will call the IKEA effect, right? If we build something, whether that's an IKEA desk or a newly built idea, we're more likely to value it and we're more likely to stick to it. Now, this is my friend, Perry Claiborne. Perry is the former COO of Patagonia. He's also a lecturer at the Stanford Design School. Now, Perry teaches this amazing class at Stanford where students will build business plans and prototypes and then pitch those prototypes to a group of investors at the end of the quarter. Now, he's taught this class for many years. Pre-AI, Perry was noticing, predictably, that students were describing their ideas as theirs, right? It was my idea, my business plan, my prototype. Increasingly, as AI is being injected by the students into the process, their language has shifted. The students' language has shifted. Now they're describing the idea, the business plan, the prototype, right? When ideas come too easily, we're less likely to wrestle with them. We're less likely to fight for them. And often, we lose that sense of ownership and purpose that is so important at work. And so before we automate, we think it's really important to understand, do employees want this automated? Is it something that brings them meaning and purpose? And if it is, and we decide to automate, we should be figuring out how do we replicate that sense of purpose in other ways. Insight 3, back AI champions who do smart things, not the ones who spew out smart talk. What we know is in so many organizations, there's a temptation to drive AI transformation top down, right? Mandates, memos, sometimes telling employees to use AI or else. The best leaders, the most effective leaders right now are recognizing that you need a combination of both. You need top-down change and you need bottom-up momentum. And in particular, they're recognizing the importance of finding these AI champions, sometimes they're called influencers, within the organization. And one of the most under-leveraged and underappreciated AI champions within an organization are cross-functional workers. We've heard a little bit about this already today. Cross-functional workers are uniquely aware of the massive coordination tax of work, right? The bottlenecks, the missed handoffs, the inefficiencies. And we see this especially when it comes to building agents. People who are highly cross-functional are significantly more likely to build AI agents. Agents, if they're built correctly in a top organizational context, right, they're uniquely suited to carry context from step to step. And that's why finding your cross-functional workers, finding those super connectors within the organization can be a really important part of an AI strategy. Now, why are these champions, why are these influencers so important? This is research I've been citing for years. This comes from my colleague Rob Cross at Babson College. What he's found is top-down change efforts, those tend to be effective in reaching 30 to 35% of employees. What does this number look like when you pair it with activating those champions or activating those influencers within the organization? I want some guesses. 85. One more. 50. So it's twice as effective, right? And that's why finding these champions can be so important, because while they might not have big titles, they have big influence in encouraging their peers to adopt the technology. Insight 4, beware of vanity metrics and the AI theater they create. Now, one of the biggest pitfalls we're seeing in our AI era right now is the treatment, and we've heard about this as well today, the treatment of AI overwhelmingly as a personal productivity tool, right? How can I use this technology to maximize my productivity, get my employees to do more with less? But that's not the biggest opportunity here. In fact, we know from a lot of research that if we over-index on individual productivity, it can lead to what's sometimes called the tragedy of the commons. You can easily imagine a world, and many of us are seeing it day to day right now, where people will seek to maximize their own individual productivity with the tool. They'll delegate their work to other AI, other humans. They'll send their AI note-taker bot to a meeting and not show up themselves, right? Individually, they might look more productive. They might even be more productive. But often, they've dumped friction on the team and organization. And this is why metrics are so important. In our report, we heard multiple examples of organizations deciding to measure AI adoption, AI success, by how many times workers click the tool, sometimes stack ranking them according to those metrics. On the other hand, we saw several intentional approaches, several leaders being very thoughtful about how do we measure AI adoption and AI success. I think Rebecca Stern is in the room today. We interviewed her for the report, and Udemy runs these Learns AI Weeks. They're essentially organizational-wide AI-a-thons. Now, unlike many organizations, right, they're not just incentivizing biggest business impact. That's part of it, highest impact experiment. But they're also incentivizing learning, right? Best before and after prompt and co-creation, right? Best peer feedback. Another of my favorite examples comes from a Fortune 100 company that we cite in the report. They're measuring something called intent diversity, meaning for a given AI tool or platform, how many different tasks or workflows or use cases are employees using that tool for? Because that's a pretty good indication of learning, if over time employees are using the technology for more and more different use cases. We've all heard the saying, what gets measured gets managed. This is especially true with AI, right? If we measure and incentivize clicks of the tool, we're going to incentivize productivity theater or this tragedy of the commons. Last insight, redraw roles so AI can optimize work across silos. What we see is it's very hard to lead an AI transformation if your org chart is wired for a pre-AI era. This is an org chart back from 1896. If we're honest, right, it doesn't look all that different from our org charts today. Now, to understand how might our org charts need to evolve in an AI era, I think it's important to understand what is the purpose of an org chart. Well, decades of organizational design research will tell us that fundamentally the purpose of an org chart is to reduce complexity, right? Org charts give us a lot of information. They tell us what are our spans of control, who to delegate work to, who to escalate work to. But what we're starting to see is AI can handle this complexity in a way that humans and the org charts sometimes can't. And that became clear to me in a study I led with my PhD advisor, Melissa Valentine at Stanford. We studied a large digital retail company, a retail company that many folks in the room will be familiar with. And we studied this organization as they were rolling out algorithms and AI to nearly every pocket of their organization. Now, this is what their org chart looked like, right? It was designed to reduce complexity. The women's buying department only needed to make decisions related to the women's buying department. But then came AI. And AI didn't need to operate in these silos, right? It could look across the entire organization. It could start to find global optimums rather than just local optimums. The problem was no human had the responsibility and jurisdiction to look across these silos and act on the insights that AI was generating. And so they recognized that they needed to redraw roles, redraw managerial roles to operate across product lines so that humans had the explicit responsibility to act on those insights that AI was generating. We're seeing this in other ways as well, this pressure testing of the org chart. Last year, Moderna made headlines by merging its IT and HR departments, right? Recognizing that for AI transformation to occur effectively, you need a combination of both. You need the deeply human lens that understands change management, resistance, how to manage a new digital workforce, that uniquely HR lens, and you need the IT lens to understand how do you develop a technology that's safe and secure and scalable. And so I think it's important to recognize where are the silos within our organization. Sometimes they're geographic, sometimes they're across function, sometimes they're across product line, sometimes they're vertical, sometimes they're horizontal. And think about how might you start to redraw those roles so humans have the responsibility to look across those silos. So those are the 5 insights. I hope you pick one, maybe 2, but at least one, to bring back to your own organization. We have the report here. And I think what's so important, what's been articulated so well today, is at the core of all of these 5 ideas, and I would argue all of the 100 ideas in the report, is the recognition that, yes, this technology is deeply technical, but it's also deeply, deeply human. Thank you.